everyone. I wanted to come on here and just do a little bit of self-reflection related to two assessments that I did this week. And both of these assessments were for children who are already in early intervention getting other developmental services, but the parents' priority at this point is now related to communication development. So they pulled me in for a speech language evaluation for two different children. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in those assessments, but the bottom line was that both children would be eligible for a service of speech therapy at least one time weekly, based on their current levels. And both children also had some global developmental issues. They were different ages with different needs. But what came out of the assessment was that these parents are already used to having people come to their home and provide therapy or intervention services. Now, I say that in quotes because I live in California, so we're not a primary service provider model in most of the states. Some of the state is. So I'm talking about my specific experience as being part of a multidisciplinary program, which we know is not always, considered to be best practice. It would be amazing to be part of a primary service provider program, but our funding system is more of a multidisciplinary program. So I already know that these families are receiving some form of home-based services. Maybe there's a component of a coaching model, but there's definitely a lot of the traditional medical model. I just want to share about the questions that these parents both asked me. So when I was leaving at the end of the evaluation, the parent said to me, "So when the speech therapy starts, what will that look or feel like?" And I'm used to jumping in with my regular, approach and talking about what coaching is and what a parent coaching model looks like and what routines-based intervention is. But this time I just said, "You know what? I have time today. Instead of me talking about what it might look or feel like, let's just try it a little bit." And so both parents were on board, and we basically just jumped into some incidental routines. I'm going to talk through what that looked like. So one of the children was newly 2, and he has a routine where he loves to stir in chocolate milk. He doesn't want to drink it, but every day parents said, this is what he wants to do. And I only discovered that because he was pulling the parent toward the kitchen. And I said, what does he want right now? And they said, oh, he wants to get the chocolate milk powder and he wants to mix it with the milk, even though he won't drink it. And I said, okay, well, how do you know that's what he wants? So I just jumped in right away and engaged them. And they said, well, he's pulling us toward that cabinet and he wants to do this at least once a day. So we, know him. And I said, yes, you know him best. So that's why I have to do a lot of observing and asking questions, because you're going to know more than I do, in terms of what at least he wants, what he's motivated by, what happens in your everyday routine, right? So I'm giving little plugs about routines-based intervention here when I'm saying those types of things to a family. And I said, if it's okay, why don't you do this routine and I'll watch. Now, this whole thing I'm about to tell you about took about 5 extra minutes of my time. If you can spot an incidental routine, jump in with some observation, strengths-based feedback, and problem solving. You'll be amazed at how quick you can accomplish some coaching that's actually really effective and meaningful for the family in just a matter of minutes. So I watched this routine and I just asked the parents some questions after I gave strengths-based feedback. Remember, always do your observation followed by strengths-based specific feedback. So I gave some strengths-based feedback saying things like, he knows this routine. He knows what the steps are. He knows what the order is. He knows where things are. He knows how to get his needs met using these gestures and vocalizations that he's using. He doesn't have any words yet. And the parent said, yes, right. And I said, and I gave the parent strengths-based feedback also. I said, and you're modeling language for him, telling him what you're doing, supporting his independence by helping him stir with the spoon himself. And we just problem solved through the routine together. Basically, I said to the family, what have you already worked on? And what do we know that he already knows that we might be able to build from? So it was good because they were able to think through it and talk about it. And they said, he's already clapping and his other developmental specialist is also working on the sign more. And I said, okay, is he showing any, ability to so far sign more? And they said, well, he will let us help him with the sign. And I said, okay, is there an opportunity in this routine where we could practice that sign, potentially just to get more practice of something he's already familiar with, and then eventually increase his independence and generalize the skill? And so between mom and dad, they figured out through our problem solving conversation that when they put in the powder, the chocolate powder, that they would just put in a tiny bit. And that would be their opportunity to say, oh, we need more, right? And so then they would add a tiny bit more. And between the two of them and me facilitating this conversation and supporting them and allowing the space for this problem solving to occur, they decided that they were going to do it at least 3 to 5 times, so little bits of powder during that routine each day. And they felt really excited about it, especially because they know the service between the evaluation to the actual first visit for speech therapy in early intervention could take, potentially 4 weeks or so. So yeah, it felt really good to show them what coaching looks like, what routines-based intervention looks like, and to feel like they know something small that they can do each day to practice. And for the other child, he was quite a bit younger, also not using any true words yet, also using very limited gestures and signs. So I like to come in and start with what's going well and what do we know is a strength, and then just always build from there. So one of the strengths that came out of the evaluation was that this child will gesture up. He can reach both arms up and will request it after dad says up and models the gesture. So when this parent asked me, what will this speech therapy in early intervention actually look like? And I said, you know what, let's take one of his strengths now. What is the routine where he gestures up? So dad said, he'll do it at the crib if he wants to get up, if I walk over. And I said, okay, let me just watch. Let's see what normally happens. So dad walked over, he said up, and he raised his hands up. And then the child looked at him, and then he didn't reach up. He just looked at him and smiled big. And then dad bent down and picked him up. And I said, okay, so he didn't do the gesture in that instance. And dad said, yeah, it's pretty inconsistent when he'll do it. And I said, okay, what do you think might support him to be able to increase that consistency? Now, in my own self-reflection, what I wish I had done differently, I wish I had said to dad, what would be your priority here in this routine? What do you think he'd be able to do? And maybe dad would say, well, I want him to climb up the crib on his own, or I want him to make a vocalization, right? I didn't give dad a chance to tell me what he thinks his son could do. I jumped in and said, how could we get that up gesture to be more consistent? Now, that's okay. It's just showing, even at this point in my coaching career, I still need to do that self-reflection to kind of realize, oh, if I had asked it this way, if I had done this way, because we know when we focus on the parent's priority and when we get their input on their priority, we are much more likely to see the parent generalize, use the skill, and have more buy-in to the coaching model because they realize, oh, it's my priority that's getting addressed. But dad was able to say, I think that maybe I'm jumping in and doing it for him too soon. And then dad said, that his partner also feels like that's what's happening, that maybe their child would try a little bit more if they didn't jump to reading his cues so quickly. So I said, oh, why don't we try it again? So dad put him back in the crib and he was still in a good, happy mood. And then, he walked away for a second and he came back and he said, up, and he did the same thing. And then I did some guided practice with dad. So a specific coaching strategy where I said, okay, wait, don't help him yet. So we both stood there and then I did some joint interaction. So I supported dad and I said, up, up, and we waited. We had to wait almost 10 seconds. But then this little guy was smiling huge because he thought, oh, here they are performing for me. He reached his little arms up and smiled really big. And then dad picked him up. And then we were able to reflect on that. How did that feel for you? Does that feel doable? Do you think this will make a difference? And we got all those good reflection questions coming in. So dad could solidify the practice and then make it his own practice when I'm gone. And yeah, it was really cool for me to be able to show the parents what the coaching would look like instead of just telling them this is a coaching model, this is why it's best practice. But then they could get more buy-in to the model too, because it felt effective, meaningful, and individualized for them in their specific situations. I hope that information was helpful. Have a great day, everyone.